We've got a Toro Timecutter SS 4200 this morning. Customer brought it in and said that it's smoking while it's running. Now we fired it up and we only got, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 seconds of runtime on it before the whole place in here was smoked out. But we got it onto the table. I'm going to take a look and figure out what's going on, and I'm going to show you how to take care of this issue on your Timecutter. Now this one has the 452cc, says cast iron cylinder sleeve, full pressure lube, oversized air filter. Now this is a 121-0799 engine. This is what they're putting on a lot of Toro and Exmark units now, some of the lower end models, in my opinion anyway. The engine seems to be halfway well built. It does seem a little bit loud, and I think that's because it has like 2 counterbalances on the inside along with the cam and everything that runs. Pretty clunky, kind of reminds me of the clunkiness of the Courage. Now this, just looking, you can see there's oil seeping all around the valve cover here and dripping right down onto the exhaust. And then there's also, you can see at the crankcase where the sump seals to the crankcase itself, we're getting seeping coming all around. We can look at this all the way around, but it's starting to seep from here and gathering, especially behind the oil filter. That's where it likes to come a lot. Now on this, I did quote the customer the gaskets here and here. Pretty easy to do, you know, later if something is going on. So they declined the extra service on those for some reason, even though they approved everything else. Now we're gonna do a crankcase gasket on this. We're gonna replace the valve cover gasket, and then we're also going to replace the PTO seal while we've got it off. There's no reason not to. We're already gonna have the sump off to do that. Now when you're in here, you wanna pay close attention if you're seeing any kind of oil coming from in between the fins here. So the fins right here will come down at the bottom. If you see oil up through there, there's oil leaking at the bottom, you've probably got an issue with the blown head gasket also. Now you would want to get that, and a lot of times down through where the spark plug is, you'll see that same oil buildup. Now over here, kind of the same thing. We've got buildup of oil in different spots, just around that crankcase gasket where it's seeping pretty bad. We're gonna get this all taken care of. First thing we need to do is basically remove a few bolts that hold the back end on. There's 4 here, I think 1 on this side, and then there's the same on the other side. To do this, it doesn't take a whole lot of tools. Basically what I've got here is, I think, everything we need. 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter. We've got a 14 and a 5/8. Couple different size extensions, just makes things a little bit easier. I've got a right angle to get straight up through to get the engine bolts and everything out. I've got a bunch of extensions on an 8 millimeter here. That's just to get the, I think, the choke cable or the throttle cable up there. I think it's the throttle and choke cable in one. It goes right in there and you can get right over the wall without having to fight with it. Hammer, a couple pairs of pliers to get the fuel line and things like that off. 10 millimeter for the starter on the other side, and that really should take care of everything. It's not a very hard process. I'll show you how to do this. Obviously we have a torque wrench. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can do it by hand. Definitely better to do it 100% right though. Now these are the 13s. Get those all loose and the whole piece just pulls straight out and off. Got a little better access to the engine at that point. These are all the same size. Throw them just over on the magnet. we're gonna come in and get the, next I'm gonna get the 5/16 through here for the throttle cable. I'll show you how to tighten that back down when we, this is what's falling out. That just tightens against the throttle cable and sets it. Now the throttle cable just pulls at this point, just barely out. So if you watch here, if you just pull it barely towards you, and then it comes out just like that. Pops straight out towards you. Just a little bend in it here. Straight in, just comes out. Now for the fuel line, we've got, see if I can get a little better view for us up top. We're gonna take the line off here, and twist, and pull. Now that's the fuel line. I'm gonna throw a shut off in the fuel line so it doesn't leak. And I wanted to get a little better view of this. So it sits in here, in this hole. And when it comes out, all you're gonna do, because we've taken it loose from here where it's connected, all we're gonna do is pull out like such. You gotta pull out first and then twist over. Comes straight out. The only thing left holding the engine on, cable wise, is there's a negative going here, a positive going to the starter, and then we've got a connection for all the wiring at the engine harness. 10 millimeter, comes straight off, and then the wire can go to the side. Now in this case, that wire's not hot, so we're not worried about unplugging anything or anything like that. You can if you'd like, safer the better. I'm just gonna screw this back on, and then I'm going to unplug this, and you just pinch and pull. It's usually a little bit easier than that. The bottom one's still locked in. There we go. And then we've got the 1/2 inch that goes straight through. That's why it's never a bad idea to have a bunch of extra extensions on hand. Now we will have to remove the oil from this. I'm going to take just the dipstick out, and I'm going to extract it from the top side. If you don't have an extractor and you're gonna drain it, there is a drain right here. You just remove the plug or the cover, and then you're going to push in and twist counterclockwise on this whole assembly, and that will start to drain the oil out of here. You can use a hose to drain it down somewhere where it's not gonna make a mess. If it's something where you're gonna do your own service on a mower, it's never a bad idea to have an extractor around anyway. Ground wires are disconnected. Pay attention as you take it out. There are two, so you want to make sure when all this goes back together, both of those ground wires get hooked back up. If you don't hook one back up, you will have problems and you'll be wondering what's going on for sure. Now there's a plug at the back side of the clutch. What you'll have to do is pull up on the tab at the top, or you can use a screwdriver and pry in between, and then you just pull it straight out. That tab comes up at the end, and then it pulls straight out. Now you can drop the deck. It makes it a little bit easier in my opinion. And then you basically want to grab a hold of the belt and rock it around. So you'll just move it around. Be careful, you don't want to pinch your fingers or anything, but you can just grab that belt and move it right around and off of that pulley there. Not getting a good light there for some reason. Okay. That's better maybe. And off. It's free. Now we'll want to remove the 5/8 bolt in the PTO and the whole PTO will come off. We've got this jacked up just a little to get me enough room to get an impact in here. If you don't have an impact, you really want one for this portion. This came off, bolts out, and PTO clutch. Oop. Well, it took a little bit of a spill there, but it is off. PTO clutch free, everything's in good shape. Now we want to take the next pulley off, which it looks like is an extended, it's like a pulley and a shaft built into one is what it looks like, I believe. They've done this on some other models. I'm going to roll the belt off. And basically, to do that, we will want the spark plug out at this point because you don't want this thing to start. None of the electricals are hooked up, so it is not killed. But all I'm doing is grabbing a corner and I'm rolling the engine. And that'll roll that belt right off. And that piece, I believe, should just come straight off. Yep, it's all one assembly that comes out as another shaft after you have an input shaft to it. Straight down and off. Now all we have is just a few bolts that hold the engine on. It's going to be a 14 millimeter. First one all the way at the back. Not easy to get a real straight shot in here. See if I can get either one of the back ones while I'm at it. So it looks like here there is a spring in the way. Sits back at the top. This is for the drive system. Get that out of the way. It just puts tension on that belt we just took off. And now I move that out of the way up underneath. Hard to see up under there. One out of 4 down. Should all be the same. This front one, I'm not sure with the... Got that jack stand kind of in the way. I believe anyway. Just go back barely with this and get that jack stand out of my way. Down. Now I got the back two, and they're kind of sitting at a bigger angle. Just kind of a pain. Let's see if I can get some more light back up there. Yep. So we're going to use our swivel. See if we can't get that to still come out like it should. Doesn't really seem like it wants to. Came out on that side. one left over here. And now we're completely free, except there is one EPA line right here that needs pulled off. The one thing we missed. Wouldn't have been too bad, I don't think, once we started to pull it anyway, but now you can bring it straight up and out. Now that we've got it off, we can clearly see underneath. The valve cover is leaking badly. It's where the majority of the oil was coming from. We've got to take all this off anyway with that crankcase gasket seeping around. Again, we're going to want to address that. And then you want to take a look at the fins where the head gasket is. So down in here, if we're seeing any oil down where that head gasket seam is, we see any sign of oil in there, we're going to replace the head gasket also while we're here, just so we have it off. This doesn't look to be, does look like we were getting a little bit of oil right around the PTO seal, which we will be replacing anyway. No big deal. And then the crankcase gasket. This should solve all of our oil leak issues. We got all the parts in. That's a 120-4260 crankcase gasket, a 120-4267 PTO seal, and a 120-4206 valve cover gasket. And get these installed. We need the 12 millimeter to get the bolts out all the way around. Got it on an extension here just to kind of keep the impact out of the way. Now the last one I took off, it does have a little clip here for the wiring, so you want to make sure that that goes back where it's supposed to. And then as you take the screws out, I believe they're all the same size, but for some reason I was thinking maybe there was two different sizes on this. Anyway, it looks like they're all the same up until now anyway. Let's see what these last two are. Yeah, so the bolts going around the outside are all the same. Before we bust this open, what we're gonna want to do is get all the dust and dirt and debris off of it. That way it's not getting down in there. Just wipe a lot of that oil and stuff off. Residue buildup. The cleaner you get it now, the less you have to mess with it later. Now we're going to take really a dead blow hammer is what you want. You can take and you can lightly tap on your edges and get it to come out. Now this one, you don't want to hit it too hard. As long as you got everything out, it shouldn't be too hard to unseat it. This other side isn't wanting to come. There's not a real good spot to hit on over here. Looks like maybe. There it goes. Try to keep it upside down. Yep. Seems like there's always still oil left in it somewhere. Quite a bit. I'm gonna come straight up and out. And if you notice, this came directly out. I'll show you how to put all that back together in a minute. All of the material all the way around has to come off. I'm gonna spare you the details of showing me do that for the next half an hour. It has to be on both sides. They've got to be completely clean. I just run a razor blade kind of right against it, and you're gonna scrape. Just continue scraping until it's done. Now if you notice it scratching at all, you want to switch up the razor blade. That razor blade's done. This is a tedious process. If you use anything aggressive though, you're gonna ruin this flat surface, which you definitely don't want to do. Get that all off all the way around here and there. I wanted to point out a couple things. Number one, I got the piece that fell down right here behind the governor out of there. It's just a piece that goes right in here. Now there's two of them, so either one of those could come out. Now there's also another piece that fell out that I heard something fall, but I didn't know what it was. That's this one right here. That is the oil pump. Now that goes directly down in here and sits in there, and that's what runs the pump when it sits basically in here like this, and then as it turns this piece, that pumps the oil up through. Make sure you don't lose that piece when you flip it upside down like I almost did and didn't even realize that it had come out. A lot of times they won't come out, they'll stay in there. It's always easier that way, but pay close attention that that doesn't happen to you. complete mess that was managed to be made. We went ahead and blew out the inside of the crankcase all the way around, wiped everything out a few different times. Now he keeps getting oil back down in the bottom because I haven't removed the oil filter. That's going to be one of the next things I'm going to do, and I'm going to replace that with a rotary 15181. Now, I don't use those expensive Exmark or Toro filters on a Chinese engine for sure. Now I do, as I call it a Chinese engine, I do really like the internal design of this engine. They've got ball bearings as opposed to just sleeves. And then the top, so down in here for the counter cranks or the counterbalances, they've actually got ball bearings there also. In the bottom, that's not the case, but it's always going to have oil and be completely immersed in oil down in the bottom case here, or at least close to it. It did seem like there was quite a bit of kind of silver in the oil as we were wiping that out of the bottom. We've got that done. I'm not going to wipe any of this down yet. Normally we'll take a rag and we'll use an isopropyl alcohol to clean it all up right before we install the gasket. We need to get the seal out of here and get it replaced. We're going to just punch it out. Got a couple different punches here, but as I find my smaller hammer, I suppose. Looks like it's over on the other side. And I'm just going to take it and go right under the lip of the seal, kind of towards the outside edge, and straight down. And then the opposite side. Just keep working around until it pops out. It will come out. Almost out of there, I think. I'm wanting to be stubborn here. Normally you can take just a screwdriver or something too, kind of pry at an angle, or a pry bar. Just make sure you don't get into the aluminum at all as you're doing it. And it'll usually just bend or break that seal right out of there. I wanted to come out the other way, just didn't. I'm going to put a 120-4267 back in it. If you created any burrs along this lip, you should be able to feel those now. So kind of work your finger around. If you feel any kind of lip, you will want to address that before you start to put this thing back together. You want to coat this with some good oil or some grease. We just used the same thick medium weight silicone grease we use for like nail guns and stuff to coat it. Kind of around the outside and then around the inside. Some of them will come pre-coated. Didn't seem like this one wanted to, or did. Just push it down kind of around the edges. This one seems like it's super easy to go in. You can drive that with a bearing driver or with a punch all the way around. Make sure it goes in even all the way around, just kind of very lightly. You just want it right under the lip. about perfect all the way around. Great. Now that that's done, we can give it a final wipe off. Now you pay close attention to the screen down in here. There's a screen that kind of picks everything up right here. So if there's been any debris or anything to get down in the bottom of this thing, it will be stuck there at this point. Let's get wiped off. I'm gonna grab another rag. Just gonna use some isopropyl alcohol. Kind of wet this, and then just kind of wipe the whole thing down nice and clean. It's amazing how much you get off of it after it's even already been wiped down. Now the basic goal with getting the gasket material off, you can see some spots where it doesn't look like it's off. The basic goal and the basic rule of thumb here is if you can't feel it, it's not there. It's what I always tell my people. It's the easiest thing to go by. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're putting a paper gasket into it, but if you can feel it, you want to take care of it and you want it to be gone. Now this was kind of hard to get off to begin with the oil fill being in the way right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 10mm bolt out at this point, just to move this out of the way. We'll keep that separate. I think I'm actually going to put it back in. Well, no, I'll just sit it over here on this magnet to the side. That should just make it easier to go all back together as opposed to trying to have to line this up in the hole as we're doing it. So the balance shaft timing. Now this one came out as I pulled it up. If yours come out, you will need to time the left balance shaft first and then time the right balance shaft from it. If we're looking, essentially the mark here has to line up with the mark that's right here. We're going to move the entire engine at this point, turn it over. Again, the plug is out, everything is lined up, all the other timing marks are lined up. We're coming over just so this is on this side. And again, we're lining it up directly with this one, this timing mark here. Perfect. It's just kind of crazy how much room and play that those top bearings have. That's one of those things where this thing seems pretty well designed, just kind of the clearances and stuff like that don't seem like they're, you know, real well made. There is all that information in the manual, but I don't see anything actually worn down in any of these to think that there's any issue at this point. We've got the seal replaced. We're going to get this gasket replaced, and then we're going to do the valve cover real quick. Now the seal, it's at 120-4260. We will put it in. And we're going to put our little keepers back in that we did take out. I guess I could put them in this side, would maybe be easier. If that one will come back out now. Kind of keep that gasket in place as we're reassembling it. You want to make sure that washer has stayed there on both of these as we're redoing it. And then I'm going to show you the easy way to do it. Since this piece fell out, we're going to actually take the oil pump assembly at the back off to make it a little easier for reassembly. I've never done one of these. And then you also want to make sure that the O-ring is seated here properly. Now on the Briggs & Stratton ones of these, what I normally will do is I'll normally just line back up the piece down below, and I'll line this back up with it and reinsert it, and then I'll just twist over the engine until it lines up with the notch here. I'll show you a much easier way to do that since I'm not real well skilled at this engine. I want to make it as easy as possible on everybody. Everything's seeming to go back together pretty well. I do like this tapered kind of shaft at the front. That's pretty nice with the reassembly anyway. Seemed that it went back together pretty well. I'm going to hold it just kind of at an angle, and I'm going to turn the engine over. Oh, I can't get it from the other side. A lot of these you can. All right, so I'm going to take a big pair of pliers. I'm going to grab this shaft with this doubled over so I don't scratch it or do any damage to it. I'm just wanting to turn it. Shouldn't be super hard to turn. I'm just trying to turn it to this point to get everything lined up on the inside, and everything should be pretty well there. It just kind of went together right at that point. Sometimes that's just what has to be done, whether you're trying to line up the slot here or not. Now this is all back together. All we would have to do is tighten that down. I am going to reinstall right now the dipstick. Just reinsert while we're right here. Well, I thought so anyway. Strange. There it goes. That is solved. Gasket is here. Start to put all these bolts back in together. I always like to start them by hand first since we're using power tools. Tighten them up. Now the ones that are cleaner, I'm going to put towards the inside. I believe that's where they came from. So it says they want you to tighten these up to 20 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern. Let's make sure that's right. Crankcase cover bolt, 20 foot-pounds. And they just say a crisscross pattern, so nothing more specific than that. I'm just getting these basically all the way down to where they need to be without torquing anything up. And then I'm going to come back with my torque wrench and tighten those up to where they need to be. Torque wrench. Kind of tight on there. Strange. Not sure I've ever had to do that. Go to 20 foot-pounds. Alright. That's 10 there. 20 foot-pounds. Now if you don't have a torque wrench, you just want to torque these pretty tight, but you don't want to over tighten them. You know, by hand, it's not a super tight feeling to it. Don't just crank them down with an impact if it's a, you know, big heavy duty impact. The only thing I hate about doing this is I never remember which ones I've done. never hurts to go back around and double check. Kind of felt like I missed one. Great. All finished. Now we can take the 10mm bolt out of the bottom to get to our oil pump. This is the piece that we did not reinstall, and that's what gives pressure to the oil pump. So it pumps your oil. Without this, not going to get very far. Take a screwdriver, just kind of pry that seal free. And here we are. Now if we turn it, we can turn the whole assembly until everything lines up. Great. It's everything pretty well lined up, it looks like. And then we're going to take a pair of needle nose pliers. We're going to pull this directly out, and we're going to keep that kind of in the same orientation it is. Over here to the side, take our other piece out. Oop, keep it just kind of where it is. And then we will line that up. So there's a notch down in there. If you look straight down through, one way it won't go down in. So this way it's not going to go, but if I line it up, it goes straight down in there. Now we can put the two back together. I thought they had to be kind of lined up a little bit more, but yeah, as long as everything lines up back together, you just line all that up, you're all good to go. And then we're going to tighten these back down. See what the spec on that is. It says 19 foot-pounds on it. Seems a little bit high to me for these. And that's got to be wrong. See, this is an M6 bolt. It says the standard foot-pound for that is 10 Newton meters. It's going to be the same on the valve cover gasket. And with that, they actually give you two different. So it says valve cover bolts here are 7 foot-pounds, 10 Newton meters. And then over here on the diagram, it actually says that it's 7.5 foot-pounds, 10 Newton meters. Now 10 Newton meters is like, I don't know, 7.3 something foot-pounds. Somebody just lost something as far as translation went. Now we're going to set this to about 7.5 foot-pounds, I think, as far as the so we're at 0 here. We're going to go to 7.5, just under 8, and that's going to be for the bottom, and then that's also going to be for the valve cover bolts when we get to those here shortly. Now if you don't get these tight enough and that bottom seal leaks, not going to be in for a very good treat. All set on that part. Everything at the bottom is good to go. All we need to address is the valve cover gasket, and we can get this thing put back together. Got 10mm bolts around the outside, 4 of them. Try not to drop them down in the spark plug hole. At least it didn't go too far. And then we've got a 1/4 inch hex sitting there. And that's just kind of an adapter That'll go back on like such. And the bolt will just come out and be set to the side along with the rest. Now these are flange bolts, if you'll notice. Two are actually a deeper flange than the others, it looks like. I'm not honestly sure which way those go. Interesting. So the deeper flange ones will go here because they will go through the flange also. So the deeper flange here will be on the bottom, and then the thinner ones will go up top. Pay attention to that when you're putting it back together. You may strip it out. I'm sure that's, you know, what a company wants you to do. Get a pry bar like I had before. I'm just going to lightly pry up on a corner. Pop that off. Don't want to do any damage or bend it or anything. This came off pretty clean. We're going to wipe it down. If there's a bunch of, move the engine away, that way I'm not getting it back into the engine, of course. If there's a bunch of stuff stuck to the inside, you want to use a wire brush or something to get that off. Try not to scratch it too much, but it is cork that's going back to it. It is pretty forgiving as long as you don't over tighten it. If you over tighten it, you're not in for a very good treat. A lot of times it likes to split, and then you're going to be right back in the same boat. At least this gasket out of all of them is the easiest to replace, along with the only other two that we're not replacing. Now that's pretty clean, I'd say. You can tell it's been leaking kind of all along there, maybe quite a while. And when you do these, if you do not have a torque wrench, be very careful not to over tighten again. You want them like hand tight, and then you want it just a tiny snug more. You don't want to over tighten them at all. Don't try to wrench them down. That all looks good. Get our valve cover gasket. Say 120-4206. We're going to also, on this side, now it doesn't have to be done, but isopropyl alcohol, always love it for cleaning things off. It just makes everything so much cleaner. And it dries really quick too. It's great when you're doing Permatex or anything like that. Just gives you a good starting surface. Wipe it down a couple times. You'll always be amazed how much you find on it when you think it's completely clean. Let's see, looking good. Now you can do this while the engine is still on as far as the valve cover replacement goes. You just take all this off. Normally if you take that back piece off like I described earlier and then take the rest of it off here, pretty easy to do, very accessible. For a DIY project, I'd say maybe an hour as long as you've got tools to do it. Not too bad at all. I'll start these down in with the impact. Get them almost all the way sealed. Okay. Almost didn't want to line up for me there for a second. All right. Same foot pound that we did on the oil pump. You'll do a crisscross pattern also, just like with anything in engineering. I haven't tightened any of these down yet. I'm just going back and forth to kind of draw everything together as one. Since it is a cork, it's pretty thick, has to kind of mash down as it goes. That one just kind of started to tighten up pretty good. we go. Perfect. Good. Put a spark plug back in it real quick. We took that out. That's an RC12YC that's in it. We're going to put a 491055T Briggs & Stratton plug. I trust these plugs a lot better than Champion. I don't know, some people will live and die by Champion, but I had a bad batch of RC12YCs one time. Ever since, I've just never wanted to go back. Now I'm going to leave that unplugged for the time being. We're going to get this thing reinstalled at this point as soon as we address one more issue, and that is the idler pulley for the drive system. I've seen some better days. I'm not going to call the customer and get approval for this. This thing has to be replaced, otherwise all they're going to do is get it back and have to immediately have it fixed again before it's really even used. If this is something we have to do once we get everything reinstalled to replace this idler pulley, which is also gonna ruin the belt at the same time, it's gonna be at least an hour's worth of labor. At this point, you know, your one bolt, 1/2 inch bolt that holds the whole thing on to replace it. Nut at the bottom side. Everything comes straight up. And that's one bad pulley. That thing, eventually those ball bearings are going to lock up. It's going to ruin that for the customer. This one here I have has a different part number on it for some reason. I'm not really sure why. See what part numbers I've got here. On this Toro unit, the part number that it tells us that it is a 106-2176. Now, this one here, which for all intents and purposes I had laying over there, this is the same thing, and this is in our computer as a 138-7597. Inside diameter is the same, outside diameter is the same, and then the length on the inside is the same. This is the same pulley completely under two different part numbers. We're going to install it, take care of that. Now that's great. Pulley has some nice bearing resistance to it, good bearings in it. That'll solve that problem. Pay close attention to where everything goes back to. I talked about the two ground wires before being attached to the engine. This plugs in, your red wire is going to go to your starter, and then you've got your fuel supply coming in, and then your throttle and choke cable. On the fuel filter, I'm going to replace it because we're tuning it up anyway, and I'll show you why I'm going to do the, keep that up top so it doesn't leak in anymore. The fuel line, if you look down in there, there's a lot of cracks all the way around the inside, and you can almost see where the inside's separating from the outside, especially all around there. It's all cracked. If that's the case, you don't want that to come off and get into your carburetor system. So you want to take care of that while you're here. Now, anything on the other side of that filter should pretty well be picked up by the filter, and it's not something to where it's a point to where it's completely rotted out at this point. So I'm not going to worry about the rest of it. This piece from there to there is very important though, because if it's not replaced, that goes directly to the carburetor without a filter. Otherwise, pieces that are chunked off will come and get stuck in the filter in normal cases. I think there's actually a few pieces, maybe even already in there. I like to get the belt all lined up here before we reinstall everything. Now if we're looking from the top side like this, there's a pulley here for your drive system, a pulley here for your drive system. Basically the belt goes around like such, and this is just straight through on the back side. And it goes around this pulley, and then it comes up to the front around the drive pulley, and then back around this idler pulley and back through. So here is the pulley right here, and then you've got your drive pulley for the engine that'll sit right about here. This will be pushed in a little bit. Your drive pulley will sit here, and then you've got the two on the outside, just like that. If we're looking at it from the top side, everything's wrapped around now. So this belt will come to about here, and that spring will pull it back this way, and it'll make it tight around this pulley, directly around, all the way around, and back through around to the pulley right here. So I guess that's a little bit wrong because it'll go out instead of there. Don't worry, that'll all wipe out. A little bit of isopropyl alcohol, take stuff like that out, no problem. Like it wasn't even there. When I was putting this back together, the keeper on the bottom side that holds the wire for the carburetor did not get reinstalled. Sorry about this. Hopefully that didn't mess anybody up at this point. Again, I don't think I've ever actually done one exactly like this. They've all been a tiny bit different. We got that set to 20. Now that the engine's on, I'm going to grab just this belt, since everything's lined up as it should be. Kind of pull this back and put that belt back on. Now, as I put it on, I'll make sure it's around this pulley. Now the belt's in everywhere that it should go at this point. And we'll tighten the engine down, and then we'll worry about getting the pulley back on. First one is the far one. We've kind of halfway lined them up at the top. You can only put them so close to where they need to go. Just want to get them started by hand. Almost there. Going. So it needs to go a little forward to line that one up. As soon as you get a couple of them started, the other one should line right up. Two on the back side. That's the one that the pulley was in the way of, so that's why we won't want to tighten all that up until we get these bolts installed. Got that
front one. Kind of hard to see from the view we're at. I think that one I'm just going to go straight up through with. Again, this is a 14 millimeter. Apparently I grabbed a 13. It's always a good start. We will right straight through here. It looks like my camera mount's kind of in the way. Bear with me here. Okay, where are we at? Okay, almost where we need to be. Trying to get everything lined up. It's difficult for this one to reach up in there. Get it started. Gotta get a straight shot and start it by hand. And we'll tighten it up. I didn't think that was gonna work, but it did. I really like this right angle. I didn't think I was going to at first. And then the front one kind of right in front of where we are. Not a real fun view, I'm sure. Got those all nice and tight. Put the pulley back on. I've got some penetrating grease I just sprayed in it just to keep it kind of lubed up. You can use anti-seize or anything like that also, whatever you'd like. We just want something on it to keep it from seizing to the shaft. You can line up the key and the pulley with the key and the shaft and it'll push right up on there. Sometimes you just have to turn it. Either way, you want to make sure it's still on all the pulleys like it should be. Looks like it came off the plastic one. Get that back on just around how it should be. We're all set. Make sure it's on all the pulleys all the way around. As long as it is, we can take this and we can put our spring at the tab right here. Spring goes here and then it gets pulled out the back side through that slot. Now it does, you want to make sure the spring ends up with the notch on the left side as opposed to the right. So that's how it clips in. We'll look up top here now. Now some people will use a spring puller to pull this through. That's what we'll normally use. So if you just push it through, you can pull the spring right out. If you have trouble doing that or don't have a spring puller, you can always just tie a piece of string right around the spring and then pull it all the way out, put it where it is, and then you can cut the string afterwards. It's easier actually to go upside down to get it out once you have it in there. Now if you double check at that point, all of your pulleys are on again. You want to make sure that they're not off. If they're off anywhere, or if they're above the pulley or below the pulley or anything like that, in any spot going all the way up top, you're going to ruin the belt as soon as you start the mower. It's kind of hard to get a good shot of the clutch electrical taking it off, but as we hook it back up, I can install that first, and basically it just plugs in. So that's all the way in. If you line up this point, there's a keyway. If you line that up with the shaft up top, you also won't have to do any twisting or turning or anything like that. Again, I'm going to throw just a little bit of this Kimball Midwest penetrating grease on there. It's good stuff, works well. Line all this up, and then right here there's a piece of rubber in the top. You want to make sure that lines up as you're pushing it up. Now as you're pushing it up, you want to kind of turn this middle nut to get that shaft to line up perfectly, and you want to make sure these rubbers line up as you're going up. Right in the middle. There we go. Put our 5/8 bolt back in. Perfect. One other thing I love about this is it works just great as far as the torque goes to put things back together. All we really have left at this point is getting the fuel line and the EPA line and all of the cables back on. I want to get both of the ground wires hooked back up. Bolt and then into the side of the block. Okay. Plug your cord in there. It's just for the main connection to the engine. Then you've got your 7/16 on the starter. Just stayed up top, giving us a little better light. You want to hold the wire and the terminal while you're tightening this down. You don't want to be able to turn the backside nut while you're doing this, and this is a 10 instead of an 11 like normal. It's always an 11 except on this engine, I suppose. It's not going to matter if you touch ground. This thing is not hot unless you're turning the key. But if you hold the tab while you're tightening, it'll make sure that the back doesn't spin also. Get it as tight as you can. You want a good connection there. We will plug the spark plug back in at this point. Got everything else pretty well done up. Take the dipstick out. We're going to add about 36 ounces of oil to it. For the throttle cable, it'll go right back in that hole we took it out of, over here. And then it'll be secured at the back. As we pull it, that is going to choke it. So we'll want it to be on full choke. And we'll want it pulled all the way this way. And that is where we will want to secure it down at. Right where that is. Kind of a bad angle on this short cable. I know about where it goes. Pull it back to about where I think it goes, and I'm going to tighten it up. See what happens. So we're on full right there. We're on choke right there. When we come off, yep, that is great. Everything's working exactly how it should. The choke is off at that point. The choke is on at that point. Off, on, off, on. That's how it should work. Exactly how it is. Should be able to see all this linkage and everything moving. Now this should be down. Looks like it's popped off. Should be down in this actual gap as opposed to where it was. It's supposed to be actually in that gap. Now when we do it, everything's still working how it should. So that's great. One more time just to show you. That's the choke that it's pulling back on. So choked, unchoked, choked, unchoked. You can verify over here that it is working. I'll show you that in 1 second. We're going to put this EPA line just right back on here. As we're choking it, when we put it on choke, you can see the choke right here move to closed. Open, closed. "36 ounces of oil in it real quick. Throw the fuel line back on, just right at the spot over here. See where my fuel line fell down to. And then we're ready to go. My fuel line is right here. Take the shut off of it. Put my line on. Other than the fact that this thing's gonna smoke for quite a while right now until it burns off all that other oil that's all over the muffler and everywhere since we had it tipped upside down and everything else, this will solve all of your oil leaking issues on any of these Toro or Exmark series engines like this. Hopefully this helps you out in your endeavors, makes it easier for you. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.